The hallway outside Courtroom 4B is the kind of place where sound travels in ways people forget to account for. The fluorescent lights hum. The floors are polished concrete, and if you're sitting on a bench 15 feet from someone who is talking to their attorney, you can hear most of what they say, even if they think they're being quiet. I was sitting on that bench waiting for Martin to come back from the clerk's office. I had a manila folder in my lap and a 3-ring binder on the seat beside me. I was not reading anything. I was just sitting. And Heather said to her attorney, in the same voice she would use to describe traffic on the highway, "He won't fight this. He's too old, and he knows it." She did not see me, or she saw me and didn't care. Either way, I heard every word. I want you to understand what I did with that information. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked at the far wall. I waited for Martin. Welcome to real-life verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. My name is Douglas Halloran. I am 68 years old. I spent 41 years as a union electrician, most of it with the same municipal utilities contractor. I supervised the crew for my last 12 years before I retired. I can read a blueprint faster than most people read a menu. I live alone in a 3-bedroom ranch house I bought in 1983. The house is paid off. Ellen and I bought it the year after Nathan was born, when a 3-bedroom felt necessary and a 30-year mortgage felt like a manageable amount of forever. Ellen passed 6 years ago. Cancer. The house still has her sewing room. 3rd bedroom on the left, just past the linen closet. I haven't touched it. Not because I can't bring myself to. Because there's no reason to. The room works fine as it is. Every August, the week before the county fair opens, I drive out to the fairgrounds, and I check every electrical panel, every generator tie-in, every temporary run they've put in since the previous year. I've done it every year since 1987. The fair board gives me a parking pass and as much lemonade as I want. They offered to pay me once, around 2003. I told them to put it toward the kids' 4-H prizes. Someone has to check these things, and I know how. That's the whole reason. I still carry a Motorola flip phone from 2011. I bought it the year Ellen was diagnosed so the hospital could reach me no matter where I was on a job site. It still works. It still charges. I see no reason to replace it. I have a son named Nathan. He is 39 years old, and he still wears the class ring I bought him in 1999. It's too tight now. I noticed that when I shook his hand at Thanksgiving, but he hasn't taken it off. I noticed that too. Nath married Heather 9 years ago. They have 2 children together, my grandchildren, a boy and a girl. The girl turned 7 in March. Heather is organized, smart, knows how her room works before she walks into it. She used to call me when Nathan was stuck at work. Not ask Nathan to call herself, and she always had the logistics already sorted, who was picking up, what time, whether the kids had eaten. I appreciated that. In 41 years of running electrical crews, I learned to appreciate a person who has already thought through the problem before they open their mouth. That is who I thought Heather was. There was one thing, small enough that I almost didn't file it away. Almost. She had a habit of leaving her sunglasses on indoors. During difficult conversations, when something uncomfortable came up, a scheduling conflict, a disagreement about the kids' routine, the glasses stayed on. I noticed it, but I didn't know what to do with it at the time. I filed it away. April 19th was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays I do my grocery run in the morning, and I was putting canned goods in the pantry shelf when the cruiser pulled up out front. I watched the deputy come up the walk from the kitchen window. I dried my hands on the dish towel by the sink before I opened the door. He was polite. He handed me the papers and waited while I signed. It was 4:30 in the afternoon by the time I sat down at the kitchen table and read through what Heather had filed. She was petitioning for a restraining order. The temporary order had already been granted. Standard procedure. The judge signs it without the respondent present, erring on the side of caution. The petition alleged harassment, threatening behavior, unwanted attempts to access the children. It listed specific dates, 14 of them spread across the previous 12 months. I read it once. I set her on the table. I went and got the 3-ring binder from the filing cabinet in Ellen's sewing room. the one where I keep my printed phone records, each page sleeved in plastic, each entry time-stamped. And I sat back down. I read it again. The petition. Then I opened the binder. I checked the first date she listed. Then I checked the second. Then I checked the third. I closed the binder. I put both hands flat on the table. There was a can of corn on the counter that I hadn't put away yet. I looked at it for a while. I had not spoken to Nathan in 3 weeks, not since he called to tell me the girl's birthday party had gone well. He had not called since. I thought about calling him right then. I thought about calling Heather. I thought about a lot of things I was not going to do. I got up and put the can of corn in the pantry. I did not call Nathan that night. I did not call Heather. I did not call anyone. I made dinner. I went to bed at my regular time. The next morning I called Martin Sobel at 8:15. Martin is 62. We worked together during my last 5 years before retirement. He represented the union in contract negotiations, and I was on the negotiating committee. He is a contracts and labor attorney, not family law, but he is the only lawyer whose number I have, and he picks up his own phone, which I have always respected in a person. I told him I'd been served with a restraining order petition. I told him I had documentation. He told me to bring everything in that afternoon. I put the binder on his desk and sat across from him while he read the petition. Then he opened the binder and went through the first several pages. He took his glasses off and cleaned them. He put them back on. He kept reading. He wore a tie clip shaped like a tiny gavel. His daughter gave it to him when he passed the bar. He told me that story years ago. He was wearing it that afternoon. I noticed it while he read. He looked up and said, "How far back does this go?" 14 months, I said. He looked back at the binder. He nodded once, very slowly, the way a man nods when he's doing arithmetic that's coming out in his favor. He told me to bring the binder to the hearing and to follow exactly one instruction. You're going to sit there and let me talk. When the judge asks you a question, you answer it in 9 words or less. You do not explain. You do not defend. You hand me the binder when I ask for it. And you do not look at her. I told him I understood. He asked if I was sure I wanted to go through with it. I told him I was sure. There was one thing I hadn't told him yet, something that had been in the binder since February of the previous year, before any of this started. I wasn't ready to name it out loud to anyone, but I knew it was there. And I knew that Heather didn't know it was there. That was enough for now. 3 weeks before the filing, I had gone to Nathan's house. Not unannounced. I'd called ahead, asked if I could come by. Something felt wrong in a way I couldn't name yet, and I wanted to look my son in the face and ask him directly what was happening in his house. We stood in the driveway. He had his hands in his jacket pockets. He looked at the middle distance somewhere past my left shoulder. I asked him what was going on with Heather because something was. I asked him plainly. He said, "Dad, can we not do this right now?" I looked at him for a moment. The class ring on his right hand, the jacket he'd had since his 30s, getting worn at the elbows. My son. "All right," I said. I drove home. "I want you to understand something about me. I have been in rooms with angry men. I have managed crews in July heat when everything is behind schedule and someone has made a mistake that's going to cost time and money. I learned 40 years ago that a raised voice is a spent round. Once it's out, it's out. You've used it. You don't get it back. So I don't raise my voice. I wait, I observe, and I remember. I did not know yet the full shape of what was coming, but I knew the shape of Nathan's silence, and I put it next to the sunglasses, and I waited. I want to talk about Ruth Kemper before we go further, because Ruth is the kind of person who clarifies a story by showing up in it. Ruth is 71. She is Heather's mother, Nathan's mother-in-law. She drives a 1996 Buick LeSabre she inherited from her own mother. She keeps a box of Kleenex on the dashboard and a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror that I am fairly certain she has never once touched. She showed up at my door 4 days after the hearing. Unannounced. I opened the door, and there she was, standing on my porch with her coat buttoned to the collar. She did not apologize for Heather. She did not explain why any of it happened. She did not offer a theory or a consolation or a practiced expression of sympathy. She just said, "I'll watch them Tuesday and Thursday. You don't ask me twice for something like that." She wrote her phone number on the notepad by the kitchen phone and left. She did not ask Heather's permission to do this. Heather is her daughter. She did it anyway. I stood at my kitchen window and watched the Lee Sabre back out of my driveway. Then I looked at the phone number on the notepad. Some people spend their whole lives being Ruth Kemper and never know it. Ruth knows it. I want to stay with you here for a moment, because we are about to go back through 14 months, and I want you to understand what those 14 months looked like before I understood what they were. They looked normal. That is the honest answer. They looked like a grandfather and the daughter-in-law coordinating the ordinary logistics of children's lives. School pickups and soccer games and overnight visits and birthday presents left at the door. They looked like a family that had its rhythms and frictions and occasional awkward silences but was fundamentally functional. And I documented all of it. Every text, every voicemail, every call. I printed them out at the end of each month. 3 hole-punched pages, sleeved them in plastic, put them in the binder in the filing cabinet in Ellen's sewing room. I started doing this during contract negotiations in the early 2000s, when you're sitting across a table from management, and they're telling you a conversation happened differently than it happened. You learn fast that the only thing that ends the argument is paper. So I started keeping paper. About work things at first. Then, about everything. It became a habit the way brushing your teeth becomes a habit. You don't think about it. You just do it because you know what happens when you don't. I was not keeping records because I suspected Heather. I was keeping records because I always keep records. That distinction matters. In February, 14 months before she filed, Heather sent me a text at 11:47 a.m. She needed someone to pick up the kids from school on Wednesday, doctor's appointment, couldn't get away in time. I confirmed. She thanked me. I printed it at the end of the month and put it in the binder. In April, 12 months before the filing, she dropped the kids off for an overnight. She was running late for a work event. I made them grilled cheese. We watched a Pixar movie, the one with the fish. She picked them up the next morning and texted "thanks again" at 9:14 a.m. Printed. Sleeved. Filed. In July, 9 months before the filing, she left me a voicemail. Nathan was working a double shift. Could I take the kids to the county fair? I called back and confirmed. The voicemail is saved on that flip phone. The callback is logged at 6:22 p.m. I took them to the fair, same as I do every year. Only this time I had 2 small people following me around, asking questions about every single thing they saw, and I did not mind that one bit. She asked me to take her children to the county fair. 9 months before she told a judge I was dangerous. I filed that one in a different part of my mind. I didn't know what it meant yet. I just made sure it was documented. In September, 7 months before the filing, I texted Heather to confirm the time for my grandson's soccer game. She sent me the field location and asked if I could bring folding chairs. Bleachers were full. I confirmed. 4:31:03 p.m. Printed. Filed. In November, 5 months before the filing, I brought a pie to Thanksgiving at their house. Nathan carved the turkey. The kids were loud, in the way kids are supposed to be loud during holidays. Heather texted me 2 days later, November 26, 10:34 a.m., asking if I wanted the leftover turkey. I told her I was fine, but thank you. Printed. Filed. I want you to stay with me here, because this is where everything I thought I understood started to come apart. In January, 3 months before the filing, Heather called me on the evening of the 14th. The call was 4 minutes long. She was looking for Nathan's old ice skates. Their son wanted to try hockey. I found them in the garage. I dropped them off the next day. Logged. January 14th, 7:43 p.m. She called me. A favor. I fulfilled it. I remember standing in my filing cabinet after I printed that one, holding the page, and thinking, not for the first time, that I was documenting something that was eventually going to matter. I didn't know how. I didn't know when. I had kept records for 30 years, and most of them never mattered at all. I thought this is probably the same. I was wrong, but not in the direction I expected. In February, 2 months before the filing, I texted Heather about taking the grandchildren to the Natural History Museum. February 11th, between 8:15 and 8:15 and 8:47 a.m. She agreed without hesitation. Suggested a time that worked for her schedule. That Saturday we spent 2 hours looking at dinosaur bones and a scale model of the solar system that my grandson told me, very seriously, was not accurate. He was right. I told him so. The restraining order would later describe that text exchange as continued unwanted attempts to access the children. I printed that entry the last week of February and filed it in a sleeve with the others without knowing it would be the second to last entry. In March, 1 month before the filing, I drove to the house to drop off birthday presents for my granddaughter. She was turning 7. Heather met me in the driveway. She thanked me for the gifts. She told me the party was small. School friends, nothing big. Without me having to ask. I did not push. I drove home. Nathan called a few days later to tell me the gifts had been a hit. Logged. March 24th. That was the last entry. There was something Heather didn't know about me, something that had been in that filing cabinet long before she started building whatever it was she was building. I had been thinking about it since the moment the deputy handed me those papers. Thinking about it when I sat across from Martin and watched him read the petition. Thinking about it when I drove home that evening and sat in the kitchen till it was too dark to see without turning on a light. She thought she knew what I had. She thought she knew what I could do. She did not know about the binder. This is where I have to ask you something before we go further. Has anyone ever assumed they knew your limits without asking? Assumed you would fold because you'd always been quiet, because you'd always let things go, because you were, in their estimation, the kind of person who does not fight back? If that's happened to you, you know what the 11 days between April 19th and May 7th felt like. Stay with me. Subscribe so you don't miss how this ends. It ends quickly. That's the part she didn't see coming. Let's keep going. On the morning of May 7, I put on the same dark blue jacket I've worn to every union proceeding, every retirement send-off, every funeral since 1994. I checked that every page of the binder was in order, which it was. I checked this 3 times. Then I put the binder under my arm and drove to the county family courthouse. Now, there's something I have not told you yet, something that has been in that filing cabinet since before any of this started. I mentioned it to no one, not to Martin before the hearing, not to Nathan on the phone, not to anyone who called to check on me during those 11 days. I mentioned it only to myself, sitting at the kitchen table on the night I was served, hands flat on the table, can of corn on the counter, reading the list of dates Heather had submitted to the judge as evidence of my threatening behavior. I had printed those dates, every one of them, monthly since February of the previous year, 14 months of texts, voicemails, and call logs, each entry time-stamped, each page sleeved in plastic, organized in a 3-ring binder I developed during union contract negotiations when I learned that memory gets flexible and documentation ends arguments. The habit began during the years Ellen was sick. I kept a flip phone active so the hospital could reach me. I started printing the records so I'd know exactly who had called and when. If anyone ever told me they'd tried to reach me and couldn't. That phone still held every voicemail, every call. I printed them every month without thinking much about it. Heather had filed a sworn statement listing 14 specific dates on which I had allegedly harassed and threatened her. Every date she listed corresponded to a page in that binder, and on every one of those pages the communication was benign, routine, cooperative. On 2 of those dates she had initiated the contact. She had sworn under oath that I had harassed her on days the records proved she had called me for a favor. I put the binder on Martin's table at the start of the hearing. I watched him open it. I sat down, straightened my jacket, and looked at the middle distance somewhere past the judge's left shoulder. Martin had told me not to look at her. I did not look at her. I did not look at her. Judge Feldman had been on the bench for 14 years. He read the petition summaries his clerk provided. He looked at the binder for several minutes. Then he asked Heather's attorney to walk him through 3 specific dates. The first was November 26th. Heather had described that date in the petition as an unsolicited and unwanted contact following Thanksgiving. Martin turned to page 47 of the binder and handed it to the bailiff to pass to the bench. The page showed a text from Heather's number, sent at 10:34 a.m. on November 26th, asking if I wanted leftover turkey. The second date was January 14th. Heather's petition described it as an intrusive phone call she had not welcomed. Martin turned to page 62. Call log. Heather's number. Incoming. 7:43 p.m. Duration, 4 minutes. She called me. 4 minutes. Asking about ice skates for her son. The third date was February 11th. By the time Martin turned to page 71, Heather's attorney had stopped taking notes. Judge Feldman looked up from the binder. He looked at Heather. He asked in the same tone he would use to ask someone what time it was, if any of the communication in those records constituted a threat in her view. She paused for a long moment. She was wearing her sunglasses. In the courtroom, under fluorescent lights, she said he made her feel uncomfortable. The judge asked her to be specific, to point to a specific communication, a specific word, a specific action. She could not. I was on the stand for less than 2 minutes. The judge asked if the records in the binder were accurate. I said, yes, Your Honor. He asked if I had ever initiated contact outside of agreed-upon scheduling. I said, no, Your Honor. He asked if I had documentation of all contact for the stated period. I said, yes, Your Honor. Martin objected twice during the cross-examination. Both objections were sustained. Judge Feldman dismissed the restraining order. He declined to issue a permanent order. He said 3 sentences to Heather's attorney in a tone that was quiet in the way that cold weather is quiet, completely still, not a degree of warmth in it. The hearing had taken 9 minutes. I stood when the judge stood. I picked up the binder. I thanked Martin and shook his hand. I did not look at Heather's table. I did not look at the third row of the gallery where Nathan was sitting on Heather's side because that is where his children were. Looking at the floor, I walked out of the courtroom. In the hallway, Martin caught up with me. We stood for a moment. That's done, he said. Yes, I said. It is. Ruth Kemper was in the hallway. She had sat in the back row through the whole hearing without making a sound. She stopped me and asked if I had a minute. I stopped. She told me Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. After school, 2 hours. She did not ask permission. She did not explain. She turned and walked toward the elevator, and I watched her go, and the hallway was very quiet. That morning, before I'd left the house, I thought again about what Heather had said in the same hallway, an hour and a half before the hearing started. 15 feet from where I was sitting, saying what she was certain was true. He won't fight this. He's too old and he knows it. I put that sentence in my pocket on the bench. I carried it into the courtroom. I didn't need to say it back to her. The binder said it back to her. The judge's 3 sentences said it back to her. 9 minutes of proceedings on a Tuesday morning in courtroom 4B said it back to her, quietly and completely, in a language she had no response to. I drove home on Route 9, which is not the fastest way, but it is the way I know. The windows were down because it was May, and not yet too warm. And the air coming through had that particular quality that air has when winter has finally decided to be done. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a moment. 41 years reading blueprints, I learned early that the print tells you everything. What's in the walls, what's underground, what's load-bearing. You have to read it right. You have to read all of it, not just the part that's convenient. She thought she had read me correctly. She thought she had the blueprint. She had the wrong version. I got out of the car. I took the binder inside. I put it back in the filing cabinet in Ellen's sewing room next to the others, where it had always been. I closed the cabinet. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. Outside, the neighbor's dog was barking at something in the yard. Somewhere up the street, a lawnmower started. 41 years of reading what was actually in the walls instead of what someone told me was there. That habit did not start in April. It did not start in a courtroom. It just turned out to matter when it finally needed to.